Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you know that we are PushON, e-commerce consultancy over in Manchester, but with offices in Edinburgh and Bristol, operating globally. We like to put on these little sessions, get somebody expert in to share something that will help you make your e-commerce business better. People on this call, some will be agency, some will be client side, but there'll be something to take away for all. Hopefully you've got your butties and your tea lined up. We are very fortunate to have today GBG Loqate, who we've known for years, since they were PC Anywhere, before they were wisely bought, because they've got an excellent proposition. We use Loqate almost by default in what we do with a lot of our e-commerce builds. They are hot, very hot on data and data quality. So I want to thank Alex Bryan. Perhaps you'd like to give a bit of an introduction about yourself and then take us through trends and strategic planning for 2024.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Simon. Lovely introduction there. I am Alex Bryan from GBG Loqate. As Simon's already alluded to, you may know us better as PCA Predict, or even if you go back far enough, Postcode Anywhere. But I've been with Loqate and GBG for 16 years, so I actually have seen that whole journey from PCA to present day. A quick bit about us. So GBG Loqate are a location intelligence business. So we have a range of SaaS data quality services to help our customers capture, enrich, and maintain quality customer data. And our mission, which is on the screen there, is to help every business in the world reach every customer in the world. And if you've used pretty much any e-commerce website in the last 20 years, you've probably used our technology, because it's the little widget that sits on the checkout and helps you quickly and accurately capture your address. We have over 20,000 customers worldwide, roughly half of those are retailers. But as you'll see from this funky little image that our design team have put together, we don't just sit in the e-commerce checkout. We go in the POS, we sit in the CRM system, pretty much anywhere within a business where data is being captured. We sit in there to help capture, enrich, and validate that data, which then feeds through into all the other services. We do billions and billions of transactions a year. Just on the past Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we did 1.1 billion transactions. And Gymshark, one of our customers, was doing 1,000 requests per second. So with some of the insights that we can glean from our platform, from some of the conversations that we have and my team have with our retail customers, we're lucky enough to understand what strategy and what challenges they're focusing on. And so today's presentation is to go through some of their key priorities. So as a quick agenda, I would start off by talking about the importance and the value of quality data. I'm going to cover localization and personalization and the importance of both of those, especially in a cross-border world. And then I'm going to talk briefly about digital wallets and some of the best practice we see there, and then fraud, finish off with fraud. So to start with, and this is shamelessly ripped from LinkedIn, a colleague of mine sent me this just last week, but I thought this was a brilliant place to start this talk about the value of data. This is a slide by a chap called Daniel Lindsay, who is the Data, Insights and Analytics Director for Estee Lauder company. So this is a retailer. This is straight from the horse's mouth. And this slide shows the value of consumer data. So if you start off, and every retailer is going to be different, but you start off with an anonymous consumer, that's worth X. Add in a first name and last name, all of a sudden it's 2.3 times more valuable, that piece of information. Add in an email address, that goes up 2.5 times more valuable, postal address 3.1, phone number 3.5 times more valuable. And then this one surprised me, but actually add in the birthday, and this is starting to go down the personalization route, 5.6 times more valuable. So the value of quality and accurate customer and consumer data is there on the screen. It should be a priority. That's the value of quality data. What about the cost of poor quality data? So, typically, and we see this, customers talk about this. There's loads of research into this. Data decays at about 20% year on year. So that's people changing their email address, people changing their mobile phone number, people moving house, sadly, people dying, all sorts of reasons. But the data that you have sitting in your systems is just rotting away, 20% year on year, even more if it's business data, 30% if it's business data. So, just sitting, even if you capture it correctly, it's just sitting there, it needs to be looked after. But on average, and here's an interesting stat, this was from Gartner, on average, companies are losing £8.2 million a year because of poor quality data, squandered resources, or operational inefficiencies, or just missed sales opportunities. $8.2 million a year. But interestingly, and we've done some reports on this, failed data at the checkout can be even more dangerous to customers. So we did a report that found that 57% of shoppers would be reluctant to buy again from a retailer if they had an issue at checkout the first time round. But more interestingly, when something does go wrong, 78% of consumers expect the retailer to fix it, even if it wasn't their fault, even if it was something with the courier. Customers expect retailers to be getting this right and to be fixing this for them. So our top tip is to get it right first time, get it right at the point of capture. 110-100 rule. I don't know if everyone is familiar with this rule, but the 110-100 rule effectively shows the cost of doing nothing. So if the cost of prevention, if the cost of using a tool like ours to capture data correctly were £1, the good news is it's not £1 per address, but say it were, the cost of correcting that later down the line, so not doing a capture at the front, but just waiting down the line to fix it, would be 10 times more. But the cost of not doing anything, just leaving that piece of data to rot away in your system, and all of the knock-on effects downstream, is 100. It's 100 times the cost to just fix it up front. So that's our tip. We always say, fix up front, use a service to capture correctly. So that is a bit about the value of data. Onto localization. So one of the most common themes that we talk about with our customers is problems with international addressing. There are 249 countries in the world, 7,117 languages, 70 scripts, written scripts, 140 different address formats. Sometimes a single country can have multiple address formats. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What's more, international addresses can have all sorts of things in them that cause havoc for shipping labels or back-end systems. Some addresses are really, really, really long. Some of them are very short. They can contain punctuation in them. The St. Louis de Haha, that's a real place in Canada. Actually came up in a customer call recently. They can be in multiple languages. They can get caught in obscenity filters. I'm sure some of our friends in the north of England know about that. And they can contain punctuation. So there's all sorts of minefields in there in international addressing that, if not standardized, if not looked at properly, can cause a lot of issue. To localize, to zoom in on one example, and this is an example that came up when we were talking to one of my customers recently. This is an example of a Spanish address, and in the UK we're spoilt because the Royal Mail data is brilliant. Every address has a very accurate postcode. The Royal Mail's PAF data is updated thousands of times a day. It's about 2,000 to 3,000 times a day. So it's very, very accurate, very granular. But when you start looking at international, things get a bit different. And also the addressing systems can be a bit wild. So this is an example of a Spanish address. And what you'll see on that screen is a number of pieces of information that are either concatenations or just pieces of vanity elements that can be added onto an address to help the postman deliver it that aren't actually part of the formal address. So it's very common in Spain to have the C/ rather than street. So you need to be able to deal with that. The house number, you'll notice, is at the end of the street name rather than the beginning. So again, something that's a bit different to here. That little, what looks like a degree symbol with the 3, that indicates what floor the building's on. And then ISDA, which is short for that word that I will absolutely destroy if I try to pronounce it, means it's in the left-hand side of the building. So this is just a fairly standard Spanish address, and it's got all these bits that aren't actually part of the formal address that you will be getting through from your customers when customers are buying from Spain. So these are the pitfalls to look out for. These are the sort of challenges. But it's worth it because here's a trend for you. Cross-border commerce is booming. According to Juniper Research, I like that name, by the way, because my daughter is called Juniper, just as an aside. But according to Juniper Research, cross-border commerce is going to double over the next 5 years. It's going to go up to $3.3 billion by 2028. And 33% of e-commerce spend is going to be cross-border. So especially in an environment where perhaps domestically the purse strings are tightening, tapping into these growing disposable incomes in the developing markets is absolutely going to be something that we need to be looking at for 2024 and onwards. And personalization is really important because these international customers, expect the same user experience on every website, whether it's domestic or international. And that's really, really important. Personalization can have a huge, huge impact on the conversion rate of a website. One of our customers, Lounge Underwear, great guys, they're local to us here actually. They went down the hyper-personalization route. And what they did was split out, they had one website that dealt with all of their international customers. They went down what they call the hyper-personalization route, which was to split out 5 territories. Each of those territories had its own imaging, it had its own language, it had its own turns of phrase which were local to the people in that country. And by doing that, they saw a 300% increase in conversion rate in each of those territories. And we can help with that as well, because when it comes to the checkout, the address lookup part in the address fields, you want to make that as personalized and as localized, hyper-localized as you can for those local customers. So a tool like ours will allow for transliteration. So a customer can either enter in their native script if they have their own character set, like Greece, for example, or in Latin, and we'll actually switch and swap. So the customer can enter in their own one. You can have it in your system, into the back-end system in Latin script. It'll accept diacritics, and again, it can strip those out if needed, which are the accents and the special characters in languages. We have location biasing, which speeds up, and speed is a huge thing at the moment. Website and e-commerce speed is what everyone's talking about. By using a tool like ours, not only are you reducing the keystrokes because you're removing about 80% of the keystrokes on the checkout, you're also speeding up with location biasing, which will effectively look at where in the world that person is, and it will default the search to that person, to that location. Highly, highly accurate. It's down to literally the address. So I can sit in my address in Malvern and type 1 and my house comes up. Very, very, very accurate location biasing. Speeds up things. And the data is really important, obviously, the data. And like I was mentioning earlier, with the Royal Mail in the UK, we are spoilt for data. But when you start looking internationally, data becomes a bit of a minefield because there's no one source that can provide everything for certain countries. So what we do is we have this thing called PDH, which stands for Persistent Data Hierarchy, where we source multiple different data sets for each country, and we sew them together using some some algorithms that we have, some AI actually as well, which will sew together that information and create a single golden record for every address in the world. So highly, highly accurate. And it means that, whatever country someone's coming from, they should be able to experience the same data quality. Alongside that is actually location. And one of the most personal things to a person is their location. So we have a range of tools that help to give the location of a person as well. Not only is that important for hard to address places, so you'll probably be familiar with things like What3Words, which is a tool which is trying to map out certain parts of the world that don't have very accurate address systems. We have really, really accurate coordinate data for all of the addresses that we cover. So that really helps with hard to address, because you can pinpoint to the front door of the property, and you can have much more accurate delivery times and delivery routes for those customers. But also really important for any country, because ship to store, click to collect are both growing. Over 15% of e-commerce in the UK is going to be click to accept by the end of this year. So it's really important to make sure that you've got really good location data for each of your customers. So all of this lends to a more personalized checkout experience, which improves loyalty and improves conversion rates. So I thought I'd just run through just a couple of slides that show what we would consider best practice, both domestically and internationally, actually, for the checkout fields. And this is going to be really good for mobile, and it's going to be really good for desktop. But obviously, again, mobile's on the rise. So one solution that's going to work for both is really what you're looking for. So the screenshots that I've got here are from Nike, one of our customers. And I think they do a really, really good job at just minimizing what the customer sees when they land on the checkout page. So you can see there's only 5 fields that need to be entered into, and you have the option of either delivery or pickup. And then, so that's the top screenshot. The bottom screenshot then shows what happens when you actually use capture. So the bit that says type your address, that's our tool. To type ahead, and you enter the address fields. So once the address has been captured, they then show the rest of those fields. So it's always good practice to allow a customer to edit an address once it's been captured, or to enter their address manually should they want to. And you'll see there's a little enter address manual option. But we really like this because it gives the customer the option to add any vanity fields in if they want to, but it also hides all of those fields to begin with. And as we know, the fewer fields a customer is presented with on the checkout, the higher the conversion rate. I think for every field that's required to be filled out, it's like 5% more dropout or something. So really, really important. And also, you can put validation into the email and phone fields to make sure that that data is being collected is as accurate as possible. We have validation tools for that. And that stops you having to, if you really want to validate an email, that sort of 2-factor or going off and checking an email address can really add friction to the checkout journey. So this from a field point of view is spot on what we recommend. But what Nike also do, which I really like, is that if a customer goes in and edits this address to be something that's wrong, for example, it might be a slip of a finger, it might be an autofill from one of the browsers that's gone wrong, or it could be fat fingers on their mobile device. If for whatever reason they enter the wrong piece of information, what then triggers is our tool called Verify. And this, I like to call it the belt and braces approach. It picks up the 20%, and I think you'd be surprised perhaps that 20% of the time people aren't using a tool like Capture, but that's what we see through our platform, certainly for some countries. And what this will do is if you enter an address that is wrong, so for example, in that example there, I changed the city the city from Worcester to Hereford. What it's done is picked up and said, did you mean Worcester? So the customer still has the opportunity to progress with Hereford if they really, really want it to say Hereford. But, this is just that belt and braces approach. And this is actually really good for fraud as well, because there's a type of fraud that's happening that's becoming more and more prevalent, where people are just editing slightly the address and then saying that the delivery didn't arrive. what a tool like this will do is it will record whether a customer has actually edited their address manually or not. So you can flag that data down the road, and we'll come on to a bit about fraud later. Some countries and some customers may actually lead with verify as well. So, places like Japan, actually, the best practice might be to lead with a tool like verify, where the customer can enter all of their address and then check it's valid. But in most territories, what we recommend is the combination of both capture first to speed up the entry of the address and get the conversion rate benefits of that, but then verify just as that belt and braces. And then the final one of best practice that I just wanted to show you on here was about the address label. So this is actually what ASOS do. So ASOS have lots and lots of international customers. And because, as I mentioned before, every country can have a slightly different format. It can be that, in some places, the state is higher up in the address. In many places, the house number is at the end of the street rather than the beginning. A one-size-fits-all solution, and especially if you just have address fields, can be quite tricky. What ASOS do, which I think is really good, is they just have an address label. And again, Capture, our address lookup tool, can support this. So whatever the country, that's going to format that address in exactly the right format for how a customer in that country would expect their address to look. So, when it looks like you're trying to shoehorn an address into a UK address format, that isn't a great experience for international customers. This kind of process means that wherever the country, wherever the person's coming from, it's going to look natural. It's going to look personalized and localized to them. So again, what we're able to do is we keep the raw formatting for that address. So whatever that needs to look like in your backend systems, you can flow it into exactly the right fields. It's just from a customer's point of view, that's what they're seeing. So those are a few slides around localization and around best practice for that to help with this absolute boom of cross-border. The next point I'm going to come on to, and this is something, again, that lots and lots of customers are talking to us about at the moment, is digital wallets. So you all know digital wallets, PayPal, Apple Pay. I love using Apple Pay. It's great. Just boop, and you paid. Everyone loves it. But there are some things to look out for. And as the stats here say, it's going to grow. It's going to carry on growing, 53% year on year, and rightly so, because it really, really streamlines the checkout process. It removes friction. It's brilliant. But the thing to bear in mind, and this is, I suppose, the one thing that I would ask you to bear in mind when if you're looking at putting in digital wallets, or if you've already done so, and you're having some issues with the data that comes through about addresses can be completely unvalidated. And this is a problem that a lot of our customers are now having. So what usually happens with somewhere like PayPal, you just enter your address the first time you set up PayPal. And then if you move house, you remember to set up a different address, or if someone else, you're shipping to someone else's address, you might have a whole load of old addresses in there or wrong addresses. The same thing with Apple Pay, it's the address that you have on your contact card. So when a lot of customers first started putting in digital wallets, what we were seeing is that they were just getting absolute gobbledygook addresses through, and it was causing loads and loads of issues. So what we recommend is absolutely use a digital wallet at the payment side, but don't use it to replace the checkout. Capturing an accurate address up front, as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, is super, super important. So that's the tip that we recommend, is to capture the address, both billing and shipping, using a tool like ours or many others on the market, and then allow the digital wallet just for the payment details. That's the smoothest route. If you do, though, have to collect the address data via the digital wallet, we also have a tool, one like Verify, which can clean that up afterwards. So you can add that into your journey as well, should you need to. But like I said, our best practice, what we recommend, is to use the address tool. And then onto my final slide. Before perhaps we have some questions, is about fraud. And again, this is something that we see a lot of. This is absolutely growing. E-commerce fraud is predicted to exceed $48 billion by the end of 2023. Lots of it happening in North America, but it's growing here as well. Account takeover, 51%. It's happening, it's growing. promotion abuse, refund abuse, or customer and friendly fraud. Friendly fraud's a funny term, isn't it? But that's just employees nicking, basically. It's all become very, very prevalent. So, costing businesses loads of money. And I think when it comes to fraud, there's always this balance, isn't there? You don't really want to add friction to the checkout. The last thing you want to do is add any kind of friction to your checkout. But you also need to see if you can catch the fraudsters. Well, one thing that we've been speaking to some of our partners about, and something that is, I guess, recommended as best practice, is rather than just having a single point where you're trying to do your fraud prevention, you put in lots of soft touch checks at every point. None of those are really adding any friction. They're very, very soft, but you build up this picture. So I think the best practice is to have at least 3 points during the customer journey where you're checking for a fraud. And on the checkout with the address, we're working on a tool with the rest of our GBG business, which the rest of GBG kind of specializes in identity and fraud. We're looking at a tool where we can have a flag along with the address just to say, this may be a bit of a sketchy address. There may have been some fraudulent activity here in the past. It's not replacing any fraud solutions, but it's adding that view, right? So over time, you're building up a really big picture. The other problem that often happens with fraud in retail is that data is siloed. So at every stage of the journey, that data's siloed away, and so you may be building up that holistic approach, but if that data isn't talking to each other, if you've got duplicate data, or it's just not a single customer view, then even though you're building up that really rich fraud information, you don't get the bigger picture. We can help with that sort of thing because we have tools that allow you to dedupe, and it will remove duff data. It will concatenate, and it will combine data that is all the same person. So if you've got the same person in there 5 times with different addresses or different email addresses or different just their initial, we can tell you that this is all the same person, and that really helps to build out that fraud view. And the other thing around fraud, which is prevalent at the moment, is bonus abuse. And it's an interesting one in retail because this is people who are signing up for a discount, and then they'll use another email address, and then use another email address. Some of our retailers don't mind, it's still customers buying, but other times it actually can add a lot of cost to a business, especially if you're giving away free sign-ups and things like that. So again, deduping that information, getting a single customer view with a tool like ours, which can verify all of that data and clean it up, and adding something in like email validation, which will confirm that it's the same person with the same email address, is going to help with those kind of solutions, those kind of problems. So that's our tip on fraud is just, again, focus on the data. Make sure you're collecting the data. Make sure you're having systems across the board that are checking that data, and that's going to give you the best chance of beating the fraudsters. And that concludes my presentation. So fairly short and sweet. I don't actually know how long that took, but it's fairly short and sweet. But we touched on the importance of data quality. We explored the trials and tribulations of international addressing, and we covered a bit of best practice around digital wallets and fraud. I hope you found that useful, a little bit of food for thought. If not, I hope at least you had some food on your lunch and learn. But it's been a pleasure to be invited here and talk about this. And I'm going to hand back over to Simon to see if we've got any questions.
Well, thanks very much for that, Alex. That was possibly the most impressive piece of timing that I've actually ever seen accidentally achieved, because you're almost exactly on 30 minutes without even measuring yourself. Not the way I expected that to be going. That was absolutely fascinating in terms of the whole fraud piece. We're seeing, as an agency, people coming to us with a lot of hacked websites at the moment for various reasons, and we're seeing it's such a cost to business. the amount of fraud that's going on, the level of sophistication is going up. We see one, not necessarily in e-commerce, that's hitting agencies at the moment, is the very convincing pitch opportunity. So you get the email in saying, hi, we run this website, it's a real website, and we're looking for representation in the UK. Our budget is significant, etc. Very interested in talking to you, like your portfolio of work. Download the RFP, which is clearly has the payload in it. So, and it's obviously with being an agency person, I speak to other people who run agencies, and everyone's getting hit with that. Certainly, the sophistication in e-commerce seems to be going through the roof as well. So that was absolutely fascinating. Again, I put a message up, see if anybody's got any questions, but I have one for you. What would be the one thing in the coming year that retailers should focus on?
Good question. So it's gonna I'm gonna harp on again, but it's don't forget the data. So like I mentioned previously, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can have a really fast and frictionless journey for the customer, but you can also make sure that you're collecting that valuable data. And when you start going into the realms of loyalty, and you start going into the realms of of really good quality communication, making sure that you have an accurate email address, an accurate phone number, mobile phone number, and accurate customer data is going to be vital, because customers are far less loyal than they used to be, and we're seeing lots and lots of our customers going to the loyalty scheme as a way of trying to keep customers spending with them. You can only really give a customer a good experience if you've got really good and accurate single view of that person. So that's the one thing, is you don't have to worry about friction. It can be fast and frictionless and have really good data at the same time.
That absolutely resonates with a lot of things we talk to our clients about. Obviously, as well as building websites, we do marketing as well. And there's a mindset piece where too many people focus on a single sale, whereas we're very much lifetime value of client. You cut your cost by making sure you retain that client, get their renewals, their next purchase, by giving them a great experience. And having that great customer data is absolutely core to that, being able to speak to them in the format they like and making sure you get there. It's worth spending a bit of money just to make sure you're getting 3, 4, 5 sales in a year to them, rather than just the one sale that was expensive to do anyway.
Absolutely.
Is there something that perhaps an implementation you've seen out in the wild that would be a great example of good control of data?
Yeah, so I touched on a couple of examples. Nike.com, brilliant. They use that combination of both capture plus verify, which we like to tout as the best option. And ASOS. Another one that's really good is Dr. Martens, and we do a lot of work with those guys. They've got the whole suite. They do on their checkout capture and verify and email and phone, because for them the data was key. You're causing all sorts of issues with poor quality data in their middleware and through to logistics when they were shipping internationally. They put in our suite of tools, and almost overnight it fixed all of those problems. So they were very pleased with that, and it's a great implementation as well. So if you're looking for some sort of food for thought on how this can look, one of those three would be brilliant ones to start.
Brilliant. Big fan of Doc Martens myself. Been something that's been with me all my life, and it's now gone down to my children. They all have quality docs, so it's a good experience there.
Good.
So there's no further questions from the panelists. I want to really thank you for doing that seminar for us. That's great, and hopefully the panelists have enjoyed digesting the information as well as their lunch and their cup of tea. So we'll be doing another one of these in January. We're going to be doing something about AI, which we'll be messaging out. So Alex, thank you so much from us at PushON, and no doubt we'll speak to you soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Bye now.